Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining, and sorry for the delay this morning as we pivoted. My name is Kate Charbonneau. I'm Assistant Secretary for Aquatic Resources. Secretary Kurtz is just finishing up another call, so I'm just going to help get the meeting started. And we'll start with roll call. If you could, I'll say your name and announce your presence. If you're here in place of one of our members, just let us know that you're here as their designee. Delegate Dana Stein. Eric Myers. Bob Allen.
Present on behalf of Bob.
Thank you. Frederica Moser.
Here.
Brandy Espinola. Matt Rowe.
This is Jim George for Matt Rowe.
Thank you. And is here. Sarah Bender.
Summer Modelfino here for Sarah Bender.
Thank you. Tom Parham. I see him.
Good afternoon.
Cliff Mitchell. Debbie Hurd Cornwell. Nadia Shahab.
Hey, Kate, this is Alicia Mulkey for MDA today.
Hi, Alicia. Allison Ghost.
Present.
Catherine McCall.
Afternoon.
Brandon Bowser. John Papavas. I'm sorry, I apologize. Papavasulu. And Bill Fawcett. Okay. Yes, we have a quorum. Okay, excellent. Next up, do we have minutes to approve?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the February 26 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Ann. Do I have a second?
I'm sure we can come up with a second here. Anybody else here on behalf of other people? Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Excellent. And we're approved. Okay. Okay, we'll kick over to Rylan now. Thank you, Riley. And here comes the secretary.
All right. So the bulk of this meeting is now going to be going over our next generation adaptation plan progress. So each of our lovely agency leads was handed a table with their tasks as outlined in the next generation adaptation plan. And we asked everybody to start taking a look at just a gut check about things that were either not started, in progress, or completed. And then we could kind of kick off a discussion about how things are looking with progress without having actually put, any sort of meaningful ARWG effort forth yet. And this would hopefully then help us identify where some of that effort would be most useful, and also see where some progress might be happening on its own and celebrate that a little bit. So we asked each of those agency leads to start preparing their information for this group here. So everybody should be well enough prepared, I hope, to get started. I did give everybody 5 minutes, and at the risk of making anyone really nervous, I did include a timer. But I just wanted to note we do have a lot of agencies, and I want to make sure everybody has time to present. That is not a scary timer. This is just so you can see your time, okay? And then after each agency kind of goes over these prompting questions, we're then going to have the rest of the time that would be devoted for that large group discussion. And that can be the place where we start to talk about some of these maybe things that we're seeing across each of the agencies, or anything that anyone wants to dive into a little deeper. And then that'll be the end of the meeting. And unfortunately, in case you did not see the email, that field trip had to be canceled. Maybe I should say postponed, because we're going to try to plan another date, but the weather is just really yucky and the stormwater conveyance is doing its thing. But we may not be able to see as much as we would like, because it'll be covered by water. So thank you for that. And I am asking with optimism, is there anybody from any of the agencies that would like to go first? Jim George. Okay. Jim George from MDE is going first. Thank you.
Thanks. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes.
All right. I'll do that. And you can tell me if I'm getting close to the 5-minute mark. But I don't really have all that much to share, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay. Can you see the full screen now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to start with the key areas of progress, a little out of order from the order of the questions. But as many of you know, MDE was required by statute to update its stormwater management regulations. And we were actually working on it before that law was adopted. So we had a little running start. That process is going to actually account for future climate change in terms of predictions of rainfall amounts for a given storm, which is a big shift in what has been done in the past. And there's only at least at the time that we made the decision to do this, there are only a handful of local governments across the country that were actually predicting future rainfall as part of their stormwater management regulations or design standards, say for bridges crossing streams or things like that. There's a big emphasis on flood management. There's going to be a consideration of watershed scale management, and then somewhat related to this are some flood studies that we're going to conduct. We've gotten money from FEMA to do that. We'll develop the models, we'll develop the methodologies and guidance. It's tied into the comprehensive flood management program that has a grant with it. And according to statute, the grant funding is supposed to be for areas that have flood studies. A lot of those flood studies were done in the 1980s, and they're out of date. Then erosion and sediment control legislation came a couple years after the stormwater legislation. Again, we're going to account for future climate change, and the bulk of the work is going to be updating the standards and specifications manual. Last time it was updated was 2011. Then there's the non-tidal wetlands mitigation regulations. A key element in this is a fee in lieu process. And that process will allow funding to be better targeted towards co-benefits like climate resilience. Moving along, living shorelines. A lot of effort has been put into living shorelines. It's been a priority of the department to reduce the amount of waivers we have. You may be familiar with the state law, 2008 state law requiring shoreline erosion control to use living shoreline methodologies where possible. And long story short, we hand out too many waivers. We have a metric in which we're measuring a reduction in issuance of waivers. And there's been a lot of activity in this area. I believe there's been some collaboration with DNR, and there's an ongoing stakeholder work group that I believe was prompted in part by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And they're having ongoing discussions about details. Dam safety. We updated our probable maximum precipitation estimate, accounting in addition for future climate change. That was a contracted out study over about 3 years. And that's basically estimating the largest storm that is, physically possible, in which case there'd be runoff and it would stress our dams. We just recently were successful in passing legislation for a dam repair and removal fund, and we've been trying to do that for years. There are a lot of private dams out that are owned by private individuals, and oftentimes they run into trouble when their dams are starting to need repairs, and they don't have the money to do it. So there will be a low interest loan framework for this, as well as fees that support that. We also committed to developing an inundation area mapping tool, which is now online. That's what happens if a dam breaks. You know, where does the water go? So we now have a tool that shows that online. It's good for local land use planners to have that information, among others. We committed to reviewing all of our different types of permits or our categories of permits. We've got about 40 different categories of permits, and we've either begun or completed screening level climate reviews for 15 of those approximately 40 permit categories. And then finally, our drinking water program. It's one of those situations where, you know, if it ain't broke, then we think it's doing fine. But the reality is, you know, we don't have a goal for like reducing nutrients to the bay. We just want to keep things working well. But we recognize that we were way understaffed for that. And to be resilient, we needed to have our much better staffing to assist the local water supplies in staying on top of everything they need to do to have robust drinking water systems. So we did successfully increase the number of staff about 2 years ago. We also committed to developing a indirect potable reuse program. It basically gives us one more tool in our toolbox. And this deals with the opposite end of the spectrum from flooding, more the situation of droughts. So we have now been working with Westminster, Maryland for the last several years. They're kind of the pilot, and they're going to be taking wastewater effluent, treating it to a very high level, discharging it to a reservoir that then serves as a source for a drinking water supply. So those are some of the key highlights.
Hey, Tim, we're about out of time. If we could just wrap it up.
All right. So we've done some work with MDP, with DNR on the dam removal guidelines. And we had a Chesapeake Bay Trust Climate Corps member help us with our living shorelines. As far as challenges, you know, a lot of time passed since these commitments were made. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. There's really no periodic check-in forum. And these commitments, I don't believe, have any formal mandate. So when other issues are a priority, these don't necessarily get the attention they need. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
See, let me stop presenting.
Do we have any other volunteers to go next? I'm just going to pick somebody then. Let's go ahead, Summer.
All right. I had a feeling you were going to pick me, I think, because you can tell I was almost about to volunteer. Well, yeah, I'm just pulling up the questions that you shared.
That you want to share, or would you like to just view my timer?
I'm happy to view the timer. It'll probably help me for staying within the bounds. But okay, so I know one of the questions you asked was around just some of the like challenges around assessing progress. I think, well, first of all, in general, I think the process that you've set up for tracking the next gen tasks and projects is really helpful. I think some of the things that we found super helpful were just the creation of the template, kind of knowing that we would have the accountability of this meeting and get to hear from everyone else and connect the dots. The things that we found to be a little bit more challenging and this will probably sound obvious, but I'll say it anyway, we're assessing progress on tasks that weren't owned or led by our agency, but where we were a collaborator. And I think especially, in some instances, if there were tasks that we had done that seemed like they could be related to the task, but hadn't been kind of explicitly performed in that way. And so I think for us going forward, we're just, being mindful of and thinking more about how we can set up better kind of consistent collaboration on some of these tasks and general resilience projects when we're in more of a supporting role. And then similarly, I think the ones that were continuous are ones that we had a little bit of trouble with tracking too. So for instance, one of the goals or tasks that MDEM is leading within the Next Gen plan has to do with integrating climate resilience into local hazard mitigation plans. And since 2023, there has been some level of integration of climate change into local hazard mitigation plans. There's a whole lot that kind of, goes into the creation of those plans in terms of how local jurisdictions get funding for them and, how resource constraints could, have an impact on what those plans ultimately look like. But, you could say, okay, we're done with that task, or we could think about where are we still seeing potential opportunities for improvement. So for us, we were thinking maybe inclusion of or encouragement of more nature-based solutions within local hazard mitigation plans would be one kind of additional area for improvement in the future. But I think some of those continuous ones, which many of ours are, will really prompt some of our thinking in the future around how do we continue measuring our success and continue kind of doing better at some of these tasks that really aren't, discrete and don't have a clear endpoint. So that was one thing that definitely came up for us. And this timer is helpful because I'm already halfway and I've only gone through the first one. So the second question around major successes to highlight. From our side, some of the major successes we wanted to highlight were, first of all, the creation of the Resilient Maryland Toolkit. And I know within the critical infrastructure sector and the recommendations there was, a recommendation to put together a portfolio of resilience efforts, tools, and data. And again, with this one, we're really happy that we've been able to put out kind of a first version of that, which is the Resilient Maryland Toolkit, but we're aware that there are things that can be done to improve that we'll need to continuously maintain it, that there may be some use cases that it's not yet fit to purpose for. So we're excited about it. That's definitely a success that we're proud of, which you can find at resilientmaryland.com. But we also see it as an area for future improvement and collaboration with some of the other agencies that were kind of listed against that work. So that's definitely one major success that we're really excited about. Another effort that we're excited about that I think relates to one of the tasks that we're involved in, but which we're not necessarily taking the lead on. I know there's the Interagency Funding Task Force creation, which is a major task that involves so many of us that are in this meeting. And one thing I did want to flag is that the Maryland Office of Resilience is convening agency resilience liaisons based on an executive order around resilience. And I wonder if there is an opportunity to connect some of the work with agency resilience liaisons to some of that interagency funding table concept from the Next Gen plan. So those are some of the big things, opportunities for the future. There's a whole bunch of things I think that came up for us that we'd love to continue connecting around. And we're really excited to hear what other agencies are working on, because I think that helps kind of jog our thinking. Even I had some notes from what Jim was saying about where we can continue kind of driving things forward in the future and find additional ways to move these tasks forward. So that's it from me. Oh, yes. And I'm Summer Modolfino. I'm with Maryland Department of Emergency Management, specifically Maryland Office of Resilience.
Perfect timing, Summer. Well done. Thank you. Okay, I ask again, even though I got silence last time. Any?
I got you, Ryland.
Okay, go ahead. And please introduce yourself.
Yep, will do. I am going to try to keep my camera on. My keep getting system load issues. So if it gets choppy, I will just drop my camera. So I'm Allison Gost. I'm a program manager for our Resilience and Adaptation portfolio over here at MDOT. And It actually was perfect timing to go after summer because a lot of the items that are listed in the critical infrastructure under MDOT's table actually ties very closely to the updates that she just provided. So I'll just kind of talk through the specifics first and then those three questions. But there's a lot of progress moving on both the resource ready and some of the investment needed actions that are listed in the table. One of the investment needed is the wetland adaptation strategy, and then also that decision support toolbox. But some of that work is ongoing with other kind of agency partners. And I think something that we haven't done yet is really kind of dig back into all of these to figure out how all the individual pieces that are going on at the agencies are working collectively to move the full strategies forward. But generally, seeing some progress on some of them. Adaptation and implementation plans and policies are happening both at individual agencies, and then also Summer's office is undertaking the statewide resilience plan. There's also the update to the state hazard mitigation plan. And because we're talking critical infrastructure, there's really very significant overlaps in that work with kind of how critical infrastructure shows up in next gen and how we want to move forward on adaptation around critical infrastructure. A couple of the activities that are called out in next gen are likely on pause indefinitely. One of those is the comprehensive inventory of critical infrastructure and assets. Subsequent conversations since next gen strategies were identified, and then conversations with other kind of partners is that mapping critical infrastructure at the state level or local level with the different definitions of critical infrastructure is likely infeasible, not feasible. And so we definitely owe that kind of component of the critical infrastructure work for next gen a second look to figure out if there is a way to kind of navigate that and really better understand where our critical infrastructure is, perhaps tapping into things like the CoSmart construction program, which has specific guidelines for critical infrastructure. So some of the specific updates, generally challenges for assessing the organization's progress. MDOT has quite a few critical infrastructure assets. For our agency specifically, it's about coordinating across our modal administrations to get updates, and then really understanding the cascading impacts. But that also applies widely to all of the partners for the critical infrastructure components: MDEM, MDA, MDP. MDOT's been in conversations with MDP to have some support on ensuring that the updated resilience improvement plan coincides with what MDP is doing, and we'll kind of do that as well as the MDEM Office of Resilience state resilience plan comes out. Project successes, Summer touched on a couple of them that are listed in the critical infrastructure piece, i.e. the decision support toolbox, some of the funding components. I do want to highlight that MDOT was able to obligate over $40 million to a significant adaptation investment program at the port, and that will make us more resilient to sea level rise and flooding in the coming decades. And so that's kind of a nod out there, but that aligns with adaptive potential of resources and communities. There's also work at DNR to fund that work as well. And then opportunities for connection. I think there's a lot of pieces happening I don't think there are a lot of pieces happening kind of individually. And so where we need to move for next gen progress is really kind of circling back up to make sure that we are checking in with all of those different pieces and understand what they mean collectively. So what does the Office of Resilience, State Resilience Plan, State Hazard Mitigation, some of the work at MDOT, and the other agencies that interface with critical infrastructure, and how does it mean for a whole for the state, especially as we talk about cascading impacts or compounding impacts from these hazards onto our critical assets. So kind of redundancies, where do they exist, and how do we move forward? So progress in pieces, definitely some challenges, but we are seeing successes. And I think just kind of a recommitment to that comprehensive and systematic integration of all of the work to better understand what it means as a whole and not just these kind of individual pieces. And I'll give my 40 seconds back.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yeah, happy to give the MDA perspective. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so Alicia Mulkey at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. I think our comments probably follow the themes from MDEM and MDOT in terms of the activity itself. It was good for us in the sense of the commitment and the next gen is a few years back, right? And we've had some staff turnover here at MDA where it was a good exercise for us to really go back through this and look at what the language of the priorities were and crosswalking to the task list that you've provided, Rylan, and let us really think about where we are now relative to kind of ambitions a few years back, and really kind of center and focus staff. Like others today, we're making better progress where MDA is the lead, right? We know what we do well, and we do that, and we stick to that. I think if you look at our chart, right, like others here, where we're co-collaborators, right? I don't know that we've taken as much initiative to reach out to DNR or, planning or whomever, to kind of see what timeline that they want to work on some of these. So we've kind of stayed in our lane, but we do think there's a lot of successes that we're proud to share today. The other thing that I'll add for kind of question one is, particularly in this administration, Secretary Addix really thinks about resiliency for farms in the context of economic resiliency, right? We really need to think about profitability for our farms. Certainly most of my time is talking on farm conservation, but we really need to also be thinking about, for these farms, transitions to next generations, right? There's certainly a lot of development pressure. Solar siting pressure is a constant conversation we're a part of now, right? So how do we think about farm profitability and letting the farms be in a space where that creates resiliency for them to continue for so much of the stewardship that is already in place here in Maryland, right? So we were really trying to think through that lens when we're looking through our definition of resiliency and climate, and really working with our farm community in kind of a broad way to make sure that they're successful in all of those endeavors. So that's how we have used to kind of reflect in the chart itself. For the highlights and successes, right, I think we've got several good stories. I'll mention probably 4 or 5 today. First for us is the Governor's Intergovernmental Commission on Agriculture. This was founded some years back. GICA is the acronym for this commission. It's been a little bit dormant for a while, but Secretary Addix has really wanted to put some new energy into that. So it includes very high-level leadership of a couple of the agencies on this call, as well as some of our key kind of agricultural stakeholders. It has subcommittees within the commission, right? They've been active for kind of maybe going on a year, really looking at, for production, what are some of those opportunities for better agency collaboration, right? Focusing on whether it be permit barriers, zoning, local zoning, right? What are the kind of things that are ways that MDA can work with other agencies to create some clarity and guidance? It's also really, I think, elevated the role of we have a value added specialist here at MDA that has been here a couple of years, really, again, thinking about diversification, right? When you're really trying to diversify small farm businesses, what do those models look like? What do those permits look like? How do you work with the health department, right? Those are things that can be very kind of nuanced depending on what the operation is. And so looking for opportunities like that to kind of make the farm business easier and more efficient are really what I think kind of key to what GICA is hoping to accomplish. And because it has high level leadership, right, the decision makers, I really think that will serve all of our agencies well, and then our farm families will benefit. So that's one success that we highlighted. Second really is just all the conservation programs, right? A number of us serve on communities together. So y'all have heard me talk about our Healthy Soils program. We're seeing a lot of momentum there, a lot of interest in both new and established farmers who are very interested in using soil health as kind of their North Star of how they're thinking about farm resiliency, and how they're planning their crop rotations, their cover crops, right? We filled a number of requests. We are always overprescribed for that funding source, right? And so we think that's a great story to look for the demand that Maryland farmers are looking to pursue. We also have the Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act that was signed just a couple of weeks ago. 2 key components of that will be our LEAF program that will be established that I think will hit on a number of the metrics that are here in the Next Gen plan, as well as an opportunity to work more closely with DNR on a new definition of regenerative practices and traditions, and allow us to really take some of those ideas of soil health principles and work with DNR partners on state lands and how those state lands are leased for agriculture, and how we really could pursue longer leases would be the goal for some of our best stewards, and looking at that opportunities to collaborate with DNR there. So I see my timer stopped me. I'll pause. Unless, Rylan, you had more.
You can wrap up if you want to do it quickly, if you had other stuff.
I think those are the highlights, and I put some of the other comments there on the chart. So I think we're good. I guess we'll do questions later though. So yeah, no, we can stop here. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alicia.
Mhm.
Do we have anybody on the line? Did Cliff Mitchell join us from the Department of Health? How about a representative from the Department of Planning? Okay. How about in the Energy Administration?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Jen Ayosa. I am the Chief of Staff for the Maryland Energy Administration. And I've just recently joined this group when one of our section chiefs had to step away. In terms of the next gen priorities, MEA doesn't really have a whole lot that we've been assigned, but I'm certainly happy to share a little bit of the resilience focused work that the agency is a part of. Probably first and foremost, we are getting ready to finalize grants under our Resilient Maryland grant program. That is roughly $10 million that is available for local governments, institutional partners, nonprofits, et cetera, to identify a plan for microgrids or distributed energy resources that can bolster both community and or facility resilience in the face of power outages or other vulnerabilities. We also, over, I don't know, the past several months, I would say, worked with the Department of Transportation to allocate around $50 million for large-scale solar that MDOT's going to be able to deploy on their properties. We also have another $50 million that is going to be dedicated in fiscal year 26 for local governments to develop solar on a variety of properties as well. And I really think that's probably it in the resilience space for MEA.
Thank you, Jen. I know you got kind of dumped right on next gen without context, so I appreciate you speaking up about some of your work today.
Not a problem.
Debbie, were you able to call in?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for some glitches. And I'm getting an echo, and I'm sorry. It's probably on my end. Let me see if I can adjust this. Okay. So I'll echo a lot, I guess, of the comments of our sister agencies already. So I'll just say that thank you, Rylan, for the opportunity to take a look at all the work that's being done and identify sort of crosswalking the work that we're doing that can support the work of the Next Gen plan, as well as identify those opportunities where we've got some room to make some improvement, and especially working with our sister agencies to try to figure out how to move things forward. So from the success or progress perspective, I'll share that in support of the work of Maryland Sustainable Growth Commission, the 12 planning principles that are integrated into comprehensive plans were replaced with 8 planning principles. Those are land, transportation, housing, economy, equity, resilience, place, and ecology. And these were approved and adopted in the legislative session. So for next session, the intent is to have those principles incorporated into planning process, so that the comprehensive plans can focus on resilience, equity, and ecology, all principles that can support the tasks identified in the plan. And the framework will be in place, and the limitation will be then in resources likely to implement that work. But we've also made progress with hiring a community resilience planner. We intend to be developing best planning practices for how we can implement this work and get it into our comprehensive plans, as well as assist the local jurisdictions. We've reviewing comprehensive plans for equity considerations is one of the tasks, and that's something that we haven't made a lot of progress on, but with our new staff on board, with the new planning principles in place, I think that's something that we'll be able to move forward in the next year or so. And I guess the only thing I would highlight on is, oh, one more thing I forgot. The developing a forestry guidance document. We worked with DNR and forestry to create this template that can be replicated for other things like Alicia was speaking to about the value-added agriculture, which is a project that they're working on. But we developed that forest guidance document to provide information to the local jurisdictions to help to educate them on forestry as being an agricultural use, how they can implement that, incorporate that into their zoning ordinances so that they can, sometimes it's, you know, there's a round hole in a square peg and you're trying to figure out how to make those things work. This document provides the local jurisdictions with that background material to help them understand the bigger picture of what forestry is. For challenges and opportunity, the way some of the tasks are written out in the Next Gen plan makes it a little difficult for an agency like MDP, because we really don't have any regulatory authority, and it makes it difficult to maybe implement some things. So one of the tasks that we were struggling with was updating land use management practices with the saltwater intrusion recommendations. We need to work, I think that's an opportunity, it's a challenge, but also an opportunity in that we can probably figure out how to work with our sister agencies to implement those types of recommendations from the plan. So I'd like to end on a positive note and say I think there's more opportunities out there for us. And I think by going through this process, that sort of raises them to the top again and sort of gives us that impetus to reach out to our sister agencies. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I think other than Department of Health, which I don't believe Cliff is here to represent, I think we've heard from everybody who had major tasks. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to.
Does it help if I'm here?
If you're here, then absolutely, please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Well, it's a little bit crazy, and I don't want to keep people from ending the meeting early. So I'm happy if you want to just go on.
Oh no, we were just going to fill the time with discussion. So go ahead, Cliff.
Oh, all right. So what I would say is the Department of Health. Well, you've probably all seen that there have been some shakeups at the federal level, and I'll assume the answer to that is common knowledge, and that they have significantly affected many parts of the state, but certainly they've had a dramatic impact on the work here at the Department of Health. The CDC, National Center for Environmental Health, has all but disappeared, which was the principal funding agency for climate change work in health departments across the country. And you all know about the EPA, so I don't need to say anything about that. We are continuing to work very hard at the state level with the Department of the Environment, the Department of Natural Resources, our colleagues at the Department of Transportation, wherever you are, Allison, because I can't see everybody in the room. And we'll continue to do so, but we don't have we don't have a federal partner anymore in health for environmental health for climate change. So I have been talking with my peers across the country as environmental health directors and health departments. They're all in the same boat. And almost all the climate change programs in the country are looking at substantial reductions or potentially elimination, unless something dramatic happens at the federal level. So I think we are relatively, in one sense, well positioned here because there's a state commitment to the idea that climate change and health are related. We're trying to figure out and talking with our sister brother agencies about how we continue to best support the climate adaptation efforts here. But we are going to be constrained in terms of both the availability of federal data and how much support there will be just in terms of bodies here at the state level, depending upon what happens with federal resources. So I think the department is certainly eager to continue to support the climate adaptation efforts however we can. But I think we're going to be challenged to figure out exactly how that is supported in practice.
Thank you, Cliff. Important note to end on, because I think you've had a lot of challenges that sort of echo what everybody else is having on top of, our current situation means that things are a lot different than when we wrote the plan. So we have to kind of deal with those additional challenges already on top of challenges that we might have faced no matter what. And so now I extend my thank you to the Department of Health as well for all of the agency leads taking the time to do that and reporting back to us on progress. And I left this, we have about 5 minutes, which is not much, but I want to open the floor for any discussion points that people want to bring up related to next gen tracking. This is not the public comment period, that will still come later. So please, if anybody has questions they want to ask or comments they want to raise, the floor is yours. And if I have dead air, I do have stuff prepared. Yes, go ahead.
So this is Jennifer Mizrahi, and I just, first of all, my heart goes out to everybody working these problems because you do not have a federal partner and we have a major Maryland budget crisis. And so, and each of these presentations was very helpful from a macro sense, but I'm wondering, Secretary, what the micro is looking like. Are people creating spreadsheets that say, this is how much money we lost here, there, and otherwise? These are the new realities in terms of regulations. What was our head count before? What are we going to have to do in terms of potential layoffs or funding and other things? Like, are people really developing complete reinventions of how they're going to get the work done under these very, very difficult situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing about this is it's a constantly moving target. We had a meeting about it this morning, so this is in the DNR context. But I know every other agency is regularly checking in with the State House. We're working with the Department of Budget Management on the funding pieces, so providing information back and forth. Same thing with the Department of Legislative Services. But at the micro level, it's so much. I mean, to the point that the conversation we had earlier today is how do we do data retention, right? So the federal government stepping away from long-term data sets, housing websites, all of these things that we have really never expected to disappear, but are disappearing and disappearing rapidly. So at DNR, we're thinking about this from the context of, the budget, obviously critically important. Federal funds not only go to our agencies, but they go to nonprofits, they go to academia. I was talking to a representative from UMCES earlier today. They are paid by the federal government to house all of our Bay program websites. If that money goes away, I mean, that's a significant amount of information we could lose. So we're thinking about it from a data long-term kind of trend analysis. The models and the tools that we use for data analysis as well, do they go away? also. Where can we get that underlying code? So at the micro level, we are looking at this from a programmatic perspective, a nuts and bolts of those programmatic perspective, a funding obviously, but not just funding to us, funding to others that are achieving the goals that we have in statute in the state, also for the federal government. In DNR, we have not seen any of those real significant regulatory rollbacks yet. A lot of that would be through DOI, Fish and Wildlife, but what we are seeing is a gutting of some of the biggest partners of ours at the federal level, NOAA, USGS, and then back in that micro space, let's talk about NOAA. They actually administer the boater safety buoys in the bay. That program gets cut. Where do the buoys go? And then how do we do boater safety? So there is a significant amount of just getting all of the things we could lose on the board right now, and then figuring out in partnership with other agencies, with nonprofits, with academia, with the business community, what can we re and co-create with them so we don't lose the work. It's a shifting target every day though, because you see the skinny budget and they put some money back in, and then, but what does that money actually go to? And so we are, it feels like we all got second jobs. And it's just figuring out what's going on. So it's a sliding scale. I think every agency is a little bit different, right, in terms of how they interact with those federal partners. And so we're all prioritizing for the agencies with that broader goals in mind, and especially those statutory requirements for all of us.
So given those immense challenges that you just outlined and responsibilities, how can non-governmental actors and partners help? Is there a team that is particularly working on the non-governmental, who else can pick up the slack work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways that this is happening. So one that I've been getting kind of brought into is nonprofits and academia already starting that process too, right? From their perspective. So I think where there's also convenings in that space, that's really important because they're going to give us that kind of external perspective. They also are, I think, more readily able to talk through some of the community specific impacts. So I think where those things are developing, plugging in and participating there is fantastic. And I think the places like the Chesapeake Bay Funders Network, conveners, Choose Clean Water in our kind of DNR space, they're doing a lot of that work. And then with the state agencies, I think we're still just getting our houses in order of what we're going to lose. And then it's plug into some of the work that's going on and rebuild in other spaces. Right now, we've been leaning really heavily into the partnerships with academia. I think the challenge is we're still in a budget that hasn't technically been cut, right? And so it's how do we start preparing for that next fiscal year, I think is where we are right now.
Forestry example. So one of the things that we're just starting to do for 5 million trees on the forestry side is working with American Forests and MDE on planning a 5 million tree kind of summit. They really is reaching out to a lot of the NGOs. On the state side, we have not lost the funding that we had in place. We are seeing reductions, particularly in the urban and community forestry side moving forward, but and so what happens? So we expect some of that functionality to remain, but we have seen some significant losses of contracts to the NGOs and some of the universities. And so those are the partners that, and even where we've gotten positive affirmation that we are going to keep our Inflation Reduction Act, urban and community forestry funding that we already had in place. Contract law is still working, that is in place. We're getting reimbursed. But that was always going to be a bump anyway, right? That was a capacity building grant. And so it's now is the time, even as they're just getting ramped up on starting it, is to planning on how do you maintain it without that level of funding, because that level of federal funding was not going to be sustained, but it was supposed to be building the skills. And so trying to build that community where how do we do the things with each other, build the community as whole, build skills, have people source from each other. Those are the kind of things we want to start those conversations, because there's a lot there's a lot we can do, but it takes a lot of attention and just really not giving up. You know, we don't have the easy path. It was never going to be easy. It's harder, but it doesn't mean that it can't in the long run be more resilient.
Well, and I think to the other piece here, you know, and so that's one unit of DNR. And so everybody's getting into that micro level really well and really quickly. I think one thing that's important for all of us is that we have state agencies that have very deep relationships with individuals in these federal agencies, right? So everybody's learning a little bit at different paces and different speeds because, you know, we'll get a heads up like, hey, you know, the pass back memo just came out. Here's what we're seeing. And so I think that's really important. And then the back end of that is we're losing so much institutional knowledge. We're losing so much pathways for information that were person to person based. And I think that's something that's really hard to quantify, and something that is doing real damage. But to Ann's point, we are fine scale. And I think really relying on the fact we've got a significant amount of expertise in the state that isn't going anywhere, but our federal counterparts are, unfortunately.
We've seen, I think, in the piece of U.S. Forest Service, state, private, and tribal forestry that we as a state interact most closely with, 42% reduction in staff for our region. And aside from just the major brain drain and the loss in long-term operators, it's the next generation. I mean, the people that were on probationary, they were the ones that were being trained to make a good, smooth transition. So I think the real damage is in how this has happened, the speed and the inability, the lack of conversation with states to be able to, it's not that we can't pick up or don't want to support some of these things, but we have not been given communication.
Do you want to?
Let me wrap this up real quick, because we need to move on to public comment. Unfortunately, there wasn't much time for discussion, but what I want to flag here is that we are responsible as the Adaptation and Resiliency Working Group for crafting recommendations for the legislature at the end of each year. That will be due in September. So August will be our last opportunity to finally craft those. I would like to start soliciting those thoughts from the group. What I'm hearing here, you know, it kind of started with Next Gen, but we couldn't come up with, do we have recommendations for our legislature that can help us move this work forward, given this situation that we're in currently? What can we do? What levers do we have that we can craft into something to submit to the commission? So think about that, take that home, send me an email if you've got something that you want to chew on, because we'll need to jump on that in August and then do in September. And that'll be a fast turnaround.
I encourage focus on workforce and skill set building.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I have a question. Does the government of Maryland train its senior staff in how to do budget and adaptation and staffing transition? Because this is the kind of speed and scope that is unprecedented. Is there already some upskilling being done to help people with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we've got a couple of things, whether it be training, whether it also be some new mechanisms for hiring former federal employees. There's a bunch of ways we're working on, also not only ensuring that the folks we have in leadership roles are able to move nimbly in those spaces, but that we're also bringing in really high level staff as well that kind of have some of those embedded skills and an understanding of how the federal government works. So yes, we've been working through that with not only at the cabinet level, but in each one of our agencies' senior leadership roles. But I think that's a really important thing, is how do we adaptively manage? And I think, you know, in the DNR context, we always talk about that in adaptively managing ecosystems, but really we need to be able to adaptively manage organizations. And that's a pretty heavy topic, or a regular topic of conversation at our cabinet meetings with our senior staff. Oh, yes. Okay. We will move to public comment next. So if you'd like to make a public comment, please put your name in the chat, and we'll go in the order that we see them. I'm going to first start in the room. Is there any public comment in the room that anyone would like to make? Okay. If you are online and you would like to make a public comment, please put your name in the chat. If you have issues with the chat function, also feel free to kind of go off mute and state your name, and we'll get you time for that. If you could keep your comments to about 3 minutes, that would be great. All right, I will give I have a couple other announcements. We'll give it another, oh, there we go. Yes, Mr. Silva.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity. Basically, people were referring to a chart, and I didn't see any presentation that was given to the stream that from you. And anyway, so be that as it may, it sounds rather bleak. I'm sorry about that. I would guess that our future is tenuous anyway. And I'm gratified to hear that, especially from the participant, Ms. Roddy, that she has asked some great questions and you were able to come back and answer. It's all been a benefit. And thanks again for your efforts. Please press on.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. And just clarification on that sheet that we were referencing, that was just for kind of internal tracking, but that sheet aligns to the next gen plan. So if you go into the next gen plan, you can see those actions under each one of the agencies. So the sheet that Rylan was referring to is just pretty much an internal kind of like checkbox, but it is based off of that broader plan that has the context underneath each one of those actions.
One question, where do I find that next, pardon me, sir, where do I find that next gen document?
Yep, we will put it in the chat right now. Put the link in there.
Bye now.
Absolutely. Any other public comment? All right, thank you all very much. I want to thank the Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County and the Annapolis Maritime Museum. As Rylan said, unfortunately, we're not able to go see the project today. It would be very active, but great project. One, we will reschedule. I think it's a really interesting mix of when we talk about resilience, physical resilience and social kind of cohesion, and the importance of kind of strong community ties, the role that plays in resilience, and highlights an area of Annapolis that has a very important history going back to segregation and the Jim Crow era, and the role it has played for community and community building, and how tying that to these resilience features is not only an educational opportunity, but an opportunity to amplify the work that we do. So we'll make sure to reschedule that because it's a fantastic site. Also going to be one of the Severn River is one of the whole Watershed Act selected watersheds, which is going to have a water quality and resilience component to it. We have another trip next week on June 3rd in the Baltimore area. So if members are able to join us, we look forward to that. And this is a response to what we've heard in previous years, which is people want to get out and see the work, get a better understanding of it. And so we're trying to select projects that kind of give us that broad suite of different resilience factors that we've been discussing in this work group. So we will be continuing with the field trips. We'll be rescheduling this one and look forward to June 3rd if anybody is able to join us. And with that, I really appreciate all the work from everyone who's participated today. I think we've got obviously some very strong headwinds, but the charge here is significant. You know, resilience is about ensuring the persistence of our communities, and that's something I know we're all invested in. So thank you very much to everybody today and for the continued work. And we'll see some folks on the 3rd, and we'll see the rest of you at our next meeting, which is August 27th, and it will be from 2 to 4 again. So thank you very much.
BT battle will be
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.